All right, guys. I hope you guys had a good lunch. Are we full?
Yeah.
Now, you can't fall asleep on these two. I need you to stay awake, okay? I got yerba mates, we got coffee, I got really crappy sodas. They're really bad for your health, but they'll keep you awake for like 5 minutes and you're gonna crash, but they're there. Don't drink of this Sprite. I'm gonna drink some of those. But yes, guys, let's funnel in here. We got two people, a dynamic duo, husband and wife here. They're gonna spit some game about microbes. And we're gonna get a little bit more interactive here on this one. I've got a microphone in my hand and we're gonna run around and answer questions probably at the end. Is that what you guys wanna do?
If you guys have questions that come up while we're talking, please feel free to raise your hand and ask them. We don't, I kind of like that. It kind of adds to it.
Great.
It's also like we'd like the room to be full when we start talking, so if anyone has burning questions, in the next few minutes, let us know.
Yeah, raise your hand and give me a chance to come by and hand you the microphone. And also, if you could do me a favor and hold the microphone pretty close to your face. That gets the best everything. So if you're gonna grab the microphone, have fun with that.
You're supposed to stick it in your mouth.
Pretty much. Oh! Don't encourage me. This will degrade pretty quickly. But this segment, guys, is actually between two jasmine ferns. This is yeah, so this is between two ferns, or actually two Carolina jessamines. Okay, these are gonna look beautiful in my backyard. I'm super excited about that. Yeah, not as catchy, but we're between two ferns here, and it's pretty cool. Okay, guys, I'm glad everybody got some food, and people are gonna start rolling in here. I want to make sure everybody knows the social tent is through these outdoor doorways. So if you want to go out there, the heaters are pumping. It's nice and warm in there. There's a bunch of tables. We have Biotherm out there. They do greenhouse heating solutions. They have a tube that infuses your water with oxygen. They have a new dehumidifier out there, and they're super cool. So make sure that you guys talk to Biotherm out there. And yeah. All right, guys. I think we're ready to kick it off with Casey and Keisha between two ferns. Woohoo!
Hilarious. All right, you guys, I'm Keisha. You just saw me. I'm back.
I'm Casey.
So I know I didn't give much space for question and answer after the microbe reality. A lot of people came up and talked to me about, their independent concerns, ideas, excitements. Tomorrow we're not talking at all. So if you've got a lot of questions, you really want to sit down and talk with us, this is a good time. We're here hanging out no matter what, so feel free to grab us. If you see us in a conversation for a very long time, go ahead and interrupt. It's okay. We tend to hang on as long as it's exciting, so get in there if you can. This part of the presentation, we want to give you some action items. We want you to be able to take, the excitement from the microbes and learn how to go home and do something with it. Like I said before, we started in really just small scale backyard cannabis. That's where our, that's where our agriculture passion started. Over the past few years, we've really transitioned into working with large scale agriculture. So we do still have a lot of compost clients that are using our compost to grow cannabis. There's someone that's in our presentation. They're actually Flora Flame. They're here today. They've been clients for a long time. But as far as our consulting goes, we don't work with the cannabis industry very much anymore. We're basically doing all food. And so this might not translate completely to a smaller garden, but what we're trying to get across here is these farmers taught us something that we were never gonna learn on our own. And it was how little of our product you could use, or a product like ours. I want to remind you, you can make this stuff at home. It's pretty simple. There's a lot of things to pay attention to. It's an active process, but these farmers helped us realize that, a yard of compost can cover like 1,000 acres. We have some clients right now that have, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 acres, and they're not buying 5,000 yards of compost. We're a small facility. We only produce 500 to 1,000 yards a year. Most of our product is sold in small bags, and so when it's going out in bulk, it's covering a massive amount of ground. And it's, it is because of these farmers that we're actually able to learn how to do our job. They are opening our mind to the possibilities of how far this stuff can go. So as we're going through this, if you have any questions, like Casey said, just raise your hand. We want to make sure you understand. If there's something that comes up for you, it reminds you of your own at-home system, and you want to, bring it up, please feel free to do that here, no problem. But try to keep it relevant to what we're talking about right now.
So that was our compost company. We just formed this business with another soil food web consultant. It's Soil Matters. It's our new spin-off of our consulting company. So I just kind of wanted to throw a tagline of that up there. But yeah, so I guess we're going to get started. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is probably something that a lot of you are already pretty familiar with. We're just going to kind of run through the tools that we use in our consulting and basically just make sure that everybody's like up with what we're talking about, make sure that we're not like blowing past something in case some people in the crowd don't know. But extracts, when we're talking about compost extracts, we like compost extracts because it is the best way to spread a small amount of compost really, really far. So, say if you have a handful of compost, trying to spread that compost out over, say, 100 square feet is going to be really difficult. But you take that compost, you put it in water, you mix it around, now you have that ability to spread that really wide and far. You're not going to be getting the organic matter bump that you would normally get from putting in a solid compost amendment, but it is something that can go really far. Right on, go ahead. We're gonna keep going into that, but yeah, so compost extract, I'll leave that alone. We'll get there.
Yeah, the compost extracts, it's when we were talking earlier about organic material in the soil and we were looking at the different pictures of microbes, right? If you remember the pictures of the very condensed, mineral-rich, not much space, very compacted soil, we have to remember when we're applying these, liquid extracts, what environment we're putting them out into, right? So your compost extract, you can think of it as a seed, like a seed of life, right? We were talking about how tiny each one of those views are, like how much life there is in one drop. So in a handful of compost, that extract can go really, really far, but whether or not they're going to take off and grow is going to depend on the environment that you're putting them in. So that's always something to consider. This stuff isn't just a throw it out and it's going to make magic, although sometimes it does. So
next, when you're making your extracts, one of the most important things you're going to need is some kind of good compost, sourcing something locally or making it yourself. And like Keisha explained in her previous talk, is checking it with a microscope, making sure that everything is there, is always necessary when doing this. Water, just like when you're filtering your waters for your plants, you want to make sure the water you're using is unchlorinated, isn't crazy toxic in certain minerals, pH is normal. All these things that affect your plant's growth and life are also going to affect the life and growth of microorganisms in your soil. Yeah, so bags, compost bags are super important when you're doing this. We use paint strainer bags from like the Home Depot. They're super cheap, and so they break a lot, but they cost like 50 cents. And so it's like replacing one is not a big deal. You can go to the grocery store and buy one of those $50 tea bags. They work great, but they're super expensive, and if you rip them, you're out $50.
Well, it is also particulate, right? So this is all going to be based off your sprayers. If you've got a sprayer that has, very fine nozzle, you're going to want to invest in a 400 micron mesh bag. The paint strainer bags work if if you've got the ability to spray through a hose, if you've got a more open nozzle, or if you're using some sort of hand pour system. So your bag is going to be directly related to the filter on your spray rig.
Yeah, and then when you're making this, you're going to need some kind of a container to make it in. So like a 5-gallon bucket works with a paint strainer bag, dunking it in, just like mixing it around, it's ready to go. Or if you're just going to be pouring it out right away, you could literally just drop compost into a bucket of water, swirl it with your hand, and put it out that way as well. Also super effective.
Dilution was on there too, and I want to hit on that for a second because if you have any familiarity with the Soil Food Web School and we look for a biological minimum, right? So when we make a compost extract or compost tea, the data set that I showed you where there was the chart that said, 500 micrograms of fungi, 300 micrograms of bacteria. What we do is like when we're working at large scale and we want to make sure that all the microbes are home, we're going to make an extract in a smaller amount. So maybe it'll be 175, 200 gallons. I put that under my microscope and I say, okay, I've got enough of every single functional group of microorganism here, and now I'm going to dilute. And so the dilution is like, you can dilute as much as you want as long as the original extract you made was full of life. And so when you're working with someone like us and we give you a recipe, we practice this all the time. We know exactly what the recipe is with our compost, and we're very confident in that. If you're working with someone else, you just want to make sure that they're confident in their recipe. Ask some questions. See if you can tell. You can tell if someone knows. Go ahead.
So next on the list, that was extract. Now we're going to talk about activated extract. Activated extract is something that we use when we are going to be like pumping into a fertigation system. Like if you're working on a farm that you're still needing to feed some kind of food and resources, but you also want to be getting biology in there. It's similar to a tea, but we're not brewing it over time. We'll make an extract with our tea bags and whatever system it is that we're using, and then we'll add food resource to that, and then we want to make sure that we have some kind of agitation, some kind of aeration, just like you would be brewing a tea, but we're applying it right away. You have a few hours, 2 to 4 hour window is usually where you want to be. And really what that does is it doesn't allow enough time for the microbes to start really getting active and really starting to go haywire in there, and can make your teas bomb anaerobic and start losing a bunch of that nutrients. Making sure, that we're always using, whenever you're making these teas, obviously if you're using salt fertilizers and things like that, that's not a great idea to be mixing that into the same container with your microbes. The salts will kill microbes. However, that being said, we do work on large-scale farms that are fully conventional, but are using microbes as, they're starting to initiate the use of microbes. And we're noticing through SAP testing and all that, that they're able to back off on their inorganic nutrients that they're putting out because they've been adding in those microorganisms into their feeding schedule.
They are some of the happiest customers we have. It's crazy. It's crazy when you add microorganisms to a conventional system, the changes that happen. And I believe it's because the soil is so poor life-wise, there's just so little life in it, that just a teeny boost makes all that even inorganic food resource more easy to uptake by the plants, right? So I think the microorganisms, they're working well in both systems, although we're always promoting the organic reality. We're always promoting creating your nutrients right on site. Oh, I would also say about the activated extracts, this is a way. We're going to get into compost teas right now, and
no, we're not.
Or in a few seconds. But the thing is like with compost teas and brewing, there's a lot more that goes into it. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. And with an activated extract, you're giving the bacteria just enough time, 3 hours, plenty of time for them to multiply and create that sticky glue. And so when we're actually spraying that activated extract on the plants, it works. As far as I can tell, it works just as well as the compost teas. I haven't done any long-term studies of this, and I certainly haven't used DNA to prove it, so this is just an observation we have. But for us, these activated extracts are a way to just very quickly make a liquid that's great for a foliar application.
So extract applications, like some of the main things that we use extracts for certain things, we use activated extracts for certain things, we use teas for certain things. The extracts, really, the best thing about an extract is that there is no glue. You're not brewing this over time, so the microbes aren't producing a lot of these glues that help them adhere to plant surfaces, and really stick onto things. Because they haven't had that time to reproduce in that material, when you pour them on your soil or you give like a root drench, they're actually able to find their way down into the soil. They don't get stuck up on the surfaces of that soil. And so it's a better way of inoculating down into your root systems. One form that we do is we actually have this 36-inch pole with a feed line that comes into it straight from a pump, and it's got openings down at the bottom of it with a lever, and we call that injection. And we can actually walk up to perennial plants and inject compost extract and even possibly with a little bit of food and activated extract down into that root system without disturbing any of the above ground roots. Seed soaking is the next thing. It's one of the farmers that we're going to be showcasing here. He doesn't ever put a seed into the ground unless it's been coated with some form of biology. Extract is great for this because it's easy to make. You can see in that picture there, literally an extract bucket. We actually have another paint strainer bag that we put the seeds into, and just dunking those in there, getting that biology present on that seed before it even goes out into the field. In that scenario, I think we're just planting cover crop mixes. But you can do this ahead of time as well. So you can use like a cement mixer and put seeds in there and just lightly mist spray your seeds. Let them tumble through all that. You can pull them out, dry them, and then when springtime comes around, you can actually plant that stuff and store it. You can store it. That's a way of doing it ahead of time in the winter when you're waiting for planting season.
Yeah, it's hard to. I guess the most important thing when we're doing this work, and the way to make it the most effective, is to actually get the biology into the soil. So if we're going no-till, this injection unit is very, very useful. And also, if you're no-till, the idea of the seed soak, right? Because the seed is going to be put into the ground. You want to do anything you can to get that active biology right around the root zone of your plants. And so I would say too, with our large-scale clients and our clients that are using tiny seeds, they need to dry those out so that they'll go through the machine easily. But when we're talking about cannabis or even small farms like your backyard when you're planting sunflower seeds or beet seeds, anything that's big enough, you can literally soak them in compost extract and let them imbibe, let them start to sprout. You put them in the paper towel and you wait till that little root comes out and you stick it in the soil. You can actually do that with microbes present, and it just works so well. We've had some clients that, they hardly use sprays at all. Like most of their movement with their soil biology is coming from seed soaks. So it doesn't sound like, a big deal. It's a very quick action. It's very easy to do, but it is a powerful tool. Yes?
Have you heard anybody doing cube soaks?
Yes, that's a really good point. Thank you. Root soak. So you can soak your cube. You can, even if I'm moving plants in my yard, right? Sometimes I'll get a wild hair and say, I want this rose bush over here. I pull it out of the ground. I dunk that whole root system in biology. And then in the next hole, I'm actually preparing by putting a small amount of good compost, putting that inoculated root ball back in the ground, watering it in with compost extract. And, you can use the microscope, like I was saying, to tell, watch how everything is progressing. You can also just use your eyes and your green thumb to understand when things are growing well, right? You use the compost extract when you need it or not. So you can do this very scientifically, or you can just do it based off of feel. It just depends on who you are and how you roll.
Another good use for the extract is into fertigation systems. Fertigation, if anybody doesn't know, is basically drip line that you can put food through. It works really well with extracts. Teas can be problematic in there because they have all those glues. It starts sticking to the linings of all that tubing and can get really funky. I would say anytime you're using fertigation in biology, flush when you're done, always. You can really send things quite haywire that way. I guess, we already kind of talked about this. Is going a little bit further in depth extract is injection is like one of our main tools that we use when we're working, number one, in landscapes, but again in perennials, because again it's a way of getting biology down into that root system without disturbing everything around it. The other great thing about it is that you can do it at any time of day because you're putting it down underneath the ground. You don't have to worry about spraying in the early morning or injecting in the early morning, injecting in the afternoon, because nothing is getting attacked by sunlight or interacting with sunlight. So it's wide open.
Yeah, the other reality too is it depends on the injection unit you have, but most of them have a lever that you pull, and that's going to adjust the flow so it actually pushes water through it. And so sometimes when we have, especially when we're working with really precious trees, we'll have a homeowner that has a tree that's, a couple 100 years old, maybe older, that they're very attached to, that's dying. And the best way to get in and work with these massive trees is to decompact them. Usually what's happened is from all the building and the human activity, the soil has got compacted down to the point where there isn't a microbial community present for that tree anymore. So you can actually use that injector to manually decompact the soil with water. So it's it's three things that you're getting here. You're getting water delivered to the root system, sometimes in the driest part of the year when we really need it. You're getting microbes delivered, food resource, and four things, you're opening up the soil. So, I mean, we are really, really into these injection units. They move things along fairly quickly compared to just spraying and pouring teas and extracts on the ground.
I guess, yeah, which leads to the last point there, though, is it is super laborious, shoving that metal rod down into the ground, counting for 15 seconds, pulling it out, walking 5 feet and doing the same thing across. So there is some examples of this on larger scales and what we, solutions that we found when working with like larger agricultural land. Compost teas. So everybody knows compost teas for sure. Compost teas are fantastic for covering leaf surfaces, dealing with issues and pests over leaf surfaces. The way we make our compost teas is we take an extract, we add that to we make extract by filtering it. We never are putting a bag or anything like that into our compost tea brewers. We're basically making our extract ahead of time, adding that to the tea brewer. And then we're adding our food resources and letting it aerate. So basically everything is already free in motion inside of that brewer when it's going. I think our next slide is actually a tea recipe. So yeah.
I want to mention the biological controls. It was important to you. You brought it up. I'm sure that some of you are familiar with like Bavaria bassiana, trichoderma. There's all these biological controls that we can use, and there's getting to be more and more every day. These are lab-grown microbes, fungi, bacteria that are usually pathogenic to some of our pests. A little trick, these are expensive cultures. You go to buy a pound of Bavaria bassiana, I think it's like $90 for a pound, right? And if you look at the actual recipe of what you should use based off the company, it's quite a bit of spore that you have to use. When we're brewing teas and using the microscope, I can take a teaspoon of Bavaria bassiana and put it into 275 gallons of extract, and I'll see the spores all sprout off. I see the hyphae. It works fantastic, and it saves me tons of money.
Because what it does is it actually awakens that spore before you're spraying it out on the plant. So a lot of times with these, with the Bavaria bassiana in particular, it is dry powder, so everything is sleeping. You put it into water, you spray it out, and you're waiting for it to emerge while it's already out on your plant. If you're adding this to your teas ahead of time, what you're doing is giving it time in solution. It gives it a moment to wake up. And then when you're spraying it out, it's already active. And so you don't need all that extra spore out there, hoping that most of it awakens. You can get it out there ahead of time. You get it out there active, and it's going to work immediately. So you can use a lot less of it in these. And there's a lot of biocontrols that are like that. Well, once they attach onto an insect, then they reproduce inside of that insect. So like basically kind of like a cordyceps does in certain ways.
You guys have seen the show, right? There's a new show out about cordyceps getting people. I've never seen anything work with soft-bodied insects the way this stuff does. It's amazing. Another little tip is just check the life cycle of your critter. Learn about like what you're trying to fight against. You can look up what type of aphid you're having a problem with and what its life cycle is, and then you have to use those controls, while thinking about how long it's going to be before they hatch out again. So with aphids, we usually have to do like 3 sprays and then they're gone. So really useful tool.
This is our compost tea recipe that we use using our compost. These things can vary depending on how biologically active the compost is that you're using. But basically, we're taking 15 gallons of compost. We extract that. You'll see some pictures of it here soon, is a GOT brewer. It basically extracts for us. So we can clip in 5 gallons at a time, let it extract, come back 10 minutes later, do it again. And we found that with that 15 gallons, the brewer is only 275 gallons or 250 gallons. But then we can dilute that out to 1-to-1. So we can actually make upwards of 550 gallons with just 15 pounds of compost. Our food resources that we add to teas are insanely low compared to everybody else. We add like 1 milliliter per gallon of food resource, usually some kind of fish hydrolysates, soy hydrolysates. Those seem to be the best food resources that we've found when we're brewing teas. Everything is the most responsive. And then short brew times as well. Usually a minimum of 8 to 9 hours, but 12 to 24 is really the max that we ever send any of our stuff through. Really, we see, we'll see rise in biological numbers, and then once you get past 24 hours, usually food resources are being consumed, and then things really start to change, and you'll actually start seeing numbers drop. So.
Yes.
Do you guys feed it just once in the beginning of the brew cycle, or throughout that 12, 24-hour period? Are there other times when we need to feed that?
No, we add all the food resource right at the beginning. And I actually, all these food resources that we're using are kept in like super, super high pH. They're kept in some kind of a preservative. So I actually like to add all the food resources to the water ahead of time so you get that dilution before you're adding any kind of microorganisms to that solution as well. And actually even aerating it a little bit, just making sure that everything's getting mixed and spread out, and all those preservatives are actually diluted enough so they're not impacting any of the biology. For us, the compost that we're using, the compost that has enough humic acid in it itself, I don't see a need for it. Especially, some of these humic acids are derived from, they're denatured with alcohol, and they're derived from labradorite and things like that. And so they can be a little bit slow to be able to react because they're denatured. That's just the way they're extracted. And then again, preserved, so yeah, it can be a little slow to decompose.
The best humic acid that you can get is the one that you make at home. Pro tip, you use a coffee filter or a t-shirt or whatever, stick it in don't squeeze it, passive is the answer. You don't want the microorganisms from your compost that are making this humic acid to come out into your water, especially if you're gonna store it, because they'll live their lives and all this crazy stuff happens. So you want a passive flow of water, but it's basically you have a basket with some sort of filter in it and a containment unit underneath. You put your compost in, you softly pour water over it, and that water that comes through will be either a golden color or a dark brown color. Those are humic and fulvic acids. They're great microbe food, they're great plant food. They're great to use for, say you have chlorinated water. A lot of people, they have chlorinated water they're working with. They think, okay, I have to go to the store, I need to buy humic acid to bind up this chlorine. Your compost will do it. So I usually do it thoughtfully, like if we're gonna make an extract or a tea and I'm working with chlorinated water, I'll have my sacrificial handful of compost that I'm dipping in first, and that's gonna deal with my chlorine, and then I'll add that to this recipe just to make sure. But you can actually, if you don't get any microbes in the humic acid, you can store it for quite a long time. And if you do accidentally get some bacteria in there, which is very easy to do, put it in your fridge. So, I'll have a gallon in the fridge. It takes quite a while to make. It drips like drip coffee, so it's very slow. But it's a way to save yourself a lot of money, just creating your own humic acid from your own compost.
Troubleshooting compost tea, we stress using the microscope. Following recipes of people that like ours is helpful, but still understanding your food resources, understanding your environment. It's usually best. It's always best to use a microscope and check this stuff. And if you are seeing issues, the first thing I recommend, like if you're seeing tons of ciliates when you're brewing your teas, the first thing I recommend is lowering the amount of food you're putting into it. Always not back off on that first before you try anything else, because that's usually what the problem is. Checking all your tanks and fittings, basically anywhere that you have slime, sludge, buildup, leftover compost from old brews, any of that kind of stuff is you're inoculating your tea with anaerobes, is all that stuff is. So you really want to make sure you're getting in there and cleaning everything. It's super annoying, but it's part of the job. It's what you got to do.
Yeah, for sure. They're not the anaerobes you want either. They're the ones that are just hanging in there. Another point that he just brought up that it's a little bit off topic, but a way that you can use the microscope to gauge your feeding, right? Like when we used to feed our cannabis, we would give pretty high feedings. Like we thought it was really low, but what would happen is we would feed, and this is how I convinced him to go biological and cut back on the feeding. Actually, it was very clever on my part. I used the microscope right after he would feed, and I would look at the soil. And you remember those spirochetes, and they were coming in and out. There's thousands of them, and they were the only thing on the screen. After we would feed our plants, I would look at the soil, and there'd be thousands of ciliates booming right after I fed a bunch of fish or a bunch of kelp. And then I would watch the soil hour by hour, and about 2 hours later, all those ciliates would drop off and disappear, and everything would look normal again. And so what that showed me about the environment was I was putting so much food in my soil, there was so much resource there that the bacteria was going crazy, and instead of my plant taking up the nutrient, the ciliates ate it all. You know, they came in and they did their job, and it was a 2-hour mess for them. They come in, they eat, they take off, they go, and there's all my food resource in a ciliate belly. Not exactly what I wanted to do. So what we would watch when we're feeding, and we kept lowering and lowering and lowering until we stopped seeing that excessive boom of anaerobic organisms right after we feed. And it's also just fun to watch, to be fair.
Spray equipment. So this is like, we get a lot of questions about this, and you know, I'm a big fan of using what you have. Like, there's no point in reinvesting a ton of money into making everything 100% perfect, because nothing's perfect. You know, there's a million different kind of pumps out there. Diaphragm pumps are the best, but if you have a centrifuge pump, whatever, you're gonna destroy some biology. It's gonna happen, but no matter what you're doing, you're always gonna be knocking back a little bit of biology while you're, you know, transporting it, feeding it, spraying it. Everything you do is gonna kill some biology, but use what you have and just do it often. That's like, I'm a very, very firm believer in that. But you know, if you can, there are a few things, like in most spray rigs and pump systems, wands, all that, there's filters. Pulling all the filters out of everything. The filters clog everything up. They build up like a whole mess of just like anaerobic inoculum inside of all your lines, inside every system that there's a filter in. So whenever we go to large scale farms, the first thing we do is go to every piece of equipment and just start digging for filters. And they put filters in everything, everywhere, all the way down the line. So big challenge for us there. Cleaning and rinsing everything after every single use, again, super annoying, but it'll help you out in the long run. Investing, the one things I do kind of like want to promote investing in is like spray guns like these. They're all open on the interior. The way they spray is actually by hitting a disc and just dissipating that way. It's not like through restriction. And that's it. We've done a lot of testing, spraying out, you know, biology, checking it before we spray it, and then using different gun systems, and these ones here have actually proven to be the best. And then if you are gonna go for, you know, reinvesting in new equipment, or you need new equipment, looking for things that are low pressure, high volume. That's the stuff that they've got a whole new line of this stuff coming out actually aimed at biological applications.
Yes.
Are you using a product to clean, or are you just flushing with a lot of water?
It depends. So we do flush with water. We like to take apart all of the different, we use banjo clips, so they're easy to take off and on. Like all of the different clips, we'll actually put that in a bucket. Like the parts that get more residue on them, we'll use like OxyClean or hydrogen peroxide, something that's, it's gonna disappear. You know, it's not gonna leave a residual chemical.
But in the scenario like where we're running things through fertigation, you can't really be running heavy cleaners through all that. So we do promote just heavy flushing, and every now and then hitting them with some kind of an enzymes. They have a lot of enzyme products out there now that you can use. I don't even know all of them off the top of my head, but there's a lot like citric acid, even things you can run through those lines to help clean them out after you've gone through a couple of feeds. And if it's not something you want to be running through every single time, so you know what I mean, so you're dumping those chemicals into your growing system.
And if you guys are asking questions, please try to give me a chance to get you with the microphone so we can get that into the system, please.
Sorry, so I can hear really well up here. I just figure everybody else can. So that's kind of our explanation on, you know, teas, extracts. Now what we want to do is jump into some of the farms that we've been working with recently and have been kind of using these practices to convert their farms. This one here is one of our... There it is. This farm here is actually in Missoula, Montana. It's over 2,000 acres of alfalfa, and they run cattle through there as well. They have a few other crops that they're growing, just like overwinter cover crops.
They do turf too, regenerative
Sod,
which who knew that was a thing? They figured out how to do sod regeneratively. Amazing.
So yeah. This is Grass Valley Farms, it's just happenstance that their farm is called Grass Valley Farms. They have nothing to do with Grass Valley. So what they do on this farm is they've invented their own style of compost extractor. It's a standalone unit. It sits on this giant trailer that they can tow around the farm. And their method is it looks like a giant kettle, and inside that giant kettle is a giant strainer. And so what they can do is they can take compost, dump it into the system, it swirls, and when they're ready when it's swirled long enough for them, they can then pull that interior basket out, and then it's ready to go. And so it's basically like making a slurry and then just pulling the screen right out of it. And from that tank, they can then inject it directly into their overhead pivots. And so this is where these guys are at. This is where the 2 pounds per acre is coming out, because they're injecting into those pivots 20 gallons an hour into those pivots, and they're still seeing beneficial benefits from that. Again, yeah, the pivots are in this style of farming. The pivots are fantastic because the ease of walking up to them. They run all off of water pressure. All the wheels turn. Everything runs based on the water pressure that's going into them. So this is something you can set up in the middle of the night. It runs all night until midday, and it's basically doing the work for you while you don't have to. This machine here, like we were talking about injectors, this is it's kind of like a ground knife. They call it I'm blanking on the name of this machine, sorry. But basically what you're seeing is these tines spin through. This is a no-till farm, but what this thing does is it decompacts soil, kind of like a broad fork. That's the word I was looking for. Where it has these knives that are about 6 inches long, and they cut down into the ground, but they're just kind of cutting and opening up space. And what they've done is attached to the back of that, every single time they drive through a field to give it that little bit of a breakup and compaction, they're running extract from a tank that's on top of this, and they run it down those tines. And so every time a tine's going into the ground, it's actually depositing biology underneath that soil, and it's actually helping them get it down underneath the ground. Because again, the most effective place for these microbes is underground. The overhead pivots are great, but again, your soil drenching from above ground, they have to travel along the plant, get to the soil, and then travel down into the soil. If you can put them directly in, then you're getting that benefit right away, and you're getting a longer survival rate.
So what's really cool about Corey Miller is he's a soil food web student, large-scale farmer, went through the soil food web classes, so he's got the lingo, he's got the knowledge, he's got the background. And then he worked with us to figure these systems out. But what was really neat about this is we've been working with consultants for quite a few years, and these low application amounts, 2 pounds per acre, they typically, what we'll see is we have a lot of farmers that spray out through pivots or through helicopters or airplanes or what have you kind of sprayer. And they'll have epic results with their crops. You'll see, rises in their production or the sugar content of their food or what have you. But when we look at it under the microscope, we don't see big gains. It's like they're just inching along. We're not seeing any predators. We're not seeing any nematodes. What was really cool about working with Corey Miller and this machine in particular was when they decided to add the extract to this. He said he'd been waiting to see protozoa in his fields for, it'd been most of the year. He came across this idea, partway through the growing season. He went out 2 weeks later to check the soil, and he found amoeba. He found flagellates. He found nematodes. And so that is amazing because he used 2 pounds per acre of compost. So what it's showing is that by actually, and I'll pair with this that his soil has a lot of organic material. The content of this soil is probably 10% organic material, which is quite high. But if you have the right environment and you apply the microbes correctly, you'll see in the microscope right away that they're thriving and taking off.
Here's another machine modification that he made. It's a seed drill. It's a no-till seed drill. This is where seeds that go into this machine have to be 100% dry. That's what we were talking about earlier about inoculating ahead of time. They have super harsh winters up there, so he inoculates all of his seeds in the winter time, stores them for the summer, and then he put in a modification onto this machine as well. So every time a seed is getting planted into the ground, it's getting a spurt of extract that goes down in there with it. So every single thing that's going into the ground He says that you never waste a pass. Anytime you're out in your garden or out in his field driving any piece of equipment, that piece of equipment is spraying or adding biology to his field in some way. That's actually the way he inoculates his seeds right there. He has a little cement mixer on site, shovels them into there, sprays compost extract on it, dumps it, moves them out, and runs through it that way. Again, yeah, he says never plant a seed without having biology on it. This is just a neat graph of his. All those soil samples right there are all from the same field. The field is like 150 acres, but it's considered one paddock. But it's just interesting. He talks about talking about the water holding capacity of organic matter in your soil, and every % of organic matter that you can increase in your soil is 20,000 gallons of water that your soil can hold. And so it's relevant on this case is, you know, in between days from 2% to 10 or 2% organic matter. If he gets a decent rain, he can actually go 5 days longer without having to add water to his soil. And you can see this, like the higher number of organic matter you have in that soil, the longer time you have in between rain events where you actually need to be out there watering your plants.
That translates to indoor or greenhouse or small scale. And it is something that's a challenge that we come across sometimes when we're working with living soils in indoor environments, artificial environments, pots. It's hard to understand how much less water you have to give when you have that kind of organic material and that kind of life in your soil. It's almost best to try to back off at the water at the same time as backing off the food resources. It all happens at once.
So this is really nice of him. He actually gave us his financials, and he was very willing to share it. At the beginning of the year, this is his first year that he's actually using biology and using compost in his growing systems. The recommended agronomist that he had out in his field told him that his bill was going to be $87,000 for fertilizer and just the run-of-the-mill, everything that he needed to do. But he went through, broke down everything that he spent on that year, and I think his number came out to, God, now I'm missing it. I think added up, it looks like it got deleted. You see it?
Total year one was $81,600. That's him investing in his education. That's him buying bulk compost from us to inoculate all of his new compost with. That's him paying people to start the process of making his own compost on farm. And now, after he's invested less money than what the chemical guys wanted him to spend, now next year he's set up to be, what is the cost?
Well, you can see a lot of this is equipment investments, and these are things that are going to carry over year after year. So investing in that first year, not only did he save around $6,000 on what the bill would have been, a lot of that equipment is going to carry over to the next year, and the costs per year are just going to continue to go down for him. And this is fields growing alfalfa. You know what I mean? So it's kind of this is direct translation to whatever crop it is that you're growing. This is another farmer that we have down in Salinas. It's Berry Green Organics, Adrian Mendoza. His family runs over 1,000 acres of strawberry. He does about 300 plus acres of organic strawberry.
Oh yeah, I talked about that earlier. So Adrian's a cool guy. What's special about Adrian is he didn't come to us wanting to save money. He didn't come to us wanting to increase his yields or to improve his crop quality. He wanted to prove to his dad that biology is important. That was his goal. And so it's interesting working with farmers. Everybody has a different goal. The farm that we just showcased before this, they're really focused on their bottom line. They wanted to know how much this is going to cost, how much it's going to save them, how they're going to win. This guy's just convinced my dad that microbes mean something. And we did it. He got our compost. He started using it. This photo that you see, that's his dad's crop. It's across the street. I was telling you guys about it earlier. They'd used glyphosate just recently, and the farmer was funny. He heard that the conventional farmer heard that we had the microscope out, and he ripped one of his plants out by the ground and ran over to the microscope, and he came to me holding it roots out like this, just can you look at it with a microscope? I just put glyphosate on this ground, a couple, recently. So we put the sample under, and we saw those voids, those weird voids. And I think the big crystalline structure in the middle is the glyphosate, and all of that dead space is what it kills. And you can see it doesn't, on a microscopic level, it doesn't actually kill everything, but it kills a lot. And so, its effect is pretty huge. But I guess what else I would like to say about this property is he's had a lot of luck using the biology, but he set himself up for that luck. He grew his own luck. And he spent 2 years actually growing diverse crops of whatever he could and not harvesting them, but tilling them into the soil. He knew that the organic matter content of his soil was super, super important. And so instead of trying to make money those first 2 years in business, he just grew crop after crop after crop, every one that he could pull off in Salinas, which is quite a few. It's sunny and warm there almost all year. And he increased the organic material. I mean, I don't actually know his percentage, but visually, when you're at his property, his soil is probably 10 times darker than everybody around him. And you can tell it's not that he's on a special piece of land. These plots are fenced off. They've been humans decided, where the lines were. And right outside of his line is white, and on his side is dark brown. And so when we got to his place, he already had pretty decent life in the soil. He started using the compost extracts and it's amazing. He's passed it on to his whole family. Everybody is using it, but they're using no data. He's the feely kind of grower. He put the extract out, walked outside, and he's like, my strawberry plants are happier than they've ever been. And so to him, that data is enough. And so our consulting with him was a whole day. We taught him how to use his machine. We helped him get the machines he wanted. We sold him the compost, and now he's the compost guy in his area. He actually hustles compost tea to all of his friends so that his compost is free.
This is the extractor unit that he's using. It's a GOT brewer. This is the setup here. You can put 5 gallons in there. There's a rod that comes down into the middle, and then there's little openings on the bottom there. This thing's great. It attaches to a IBC tote, 275 gallon IBC tote. It has a big air blower on top of it, and basically lock into it with the cam locks. You flip a switch, the aerator starts going, and it does all the extracting for you. Come back 10 minutes later, pop it off, refresh if you need to. It's a pretty sweet machine. It's great because IBZ totes are just super easy to source. They all have cam fitting attachments that you can get to them. They're contained vessels. So Corey Miller, when he uses the IPC totes as well, just forks onto a tractor, and then he can swap them out quickly when he's in the middle of whatever he's doing. Everything kind of connects and swaps really easy.
It just blows air and agitates directly into the back.
So it has 2. There's a bar that runs down here that runs underneath the groundwater there. It has enough lift, even though these are square bottom containers. They've been designed that the air coming out of there has enough lift to create current that pulls any sediment from this side across and shoots it back up. And then down inside of the pipe, this is all contained. The air blows up from here, runs up to the compost, hits that dome, has nowhere to go but to swirl back through, and it keeps the compost in circulation as well. And so you can actually, when you're done extracting, you can pull this unit off, and then just this bar down below actually does the agitating, and you can leave it for a tea. If you need to brew a tea in that, then you can do it that way as well. He goes directly from those GOT brewers into a transfer tank. He can drive it straight out to his injector pumps and to connect right into whichever field he wants it to go into, plugs it in, it goes right through the fertigation system, and then he flushes. He uses extract on almost every single time he gives water, he's giving extract. We just actually talked to him yesterday before we came here. They should be on their 3rd feeding cycle for the year, and they haven't fed once yet. This year, and that's with the organic and the conventional. They haven't actually had to add any food to their crop yet.
He also said his dad's crowns are bigger than the neighbors, so they're happy about that. Dad's convinced now. He's super stoked. I want to mention, too, it's a good time to bring it up with the fertigation. If you're going to put biology, especially compost extract, through the fertigation system, what you can do to flush is just kind of do your math on how much watering you're going to do. So say you were going to turn your drip on for 30 minutes. Maybe the first 10 minutes is going to be extract running through the line. Then you cut your extract, flip to water. The second half of your watering cycle is going to flush for you. And then that way you're flushing while you're watering and you're not wasting a bunch of water, because if you flush afterwards directly under the ground, we all know we don't have the water to spare here. So that's a way that you can save some water. And then maybe once a month, or depending on how often you're running biology through, you do a good cleaning flush with your acids or your enzymes.
This is another example of ours. It's the Gala Vineyards. They have 2 locations. One location is in Placerville. That one's like the star. We'll talk about that in a second. And then their other location in Napa, they grow Cabernet grapes for wine. This clicker. So the Napa farm it's still technically conventional. They're not organic, but we are working in side by side with the organics. With organic nutrients now. They're slowly converting over, except for the fact that they still need to use a fungicide for some kind of leaf disease I'm not remembering right now. Yeah.
The point would be, though, that it's harder to transition over from a perennial chemical agriculture reality into an organic one. It's going to be a lot more holdups along the way. It's going to take a lot of time. These guys were one of our first clients as far as ag goes. They bought compost from us in our first year, so we have a long-running relationship with them. We've been working with them for 5 years. The very first year that they started, go ahead and go to the next slide, Casey. They had this old orchard or vineyard that they were trying to improve, and it is vastly improved. The ground used to be bare. They're using cover plants now. They've increased yields. The quality of the fruit has gotten better. But at the same time, and I know these pictures, they could be way better. We didn't invest any time in going out there this year to take photos, but they started from scratch with a second vineyard. And what they did was they went fully biological. They started putting compost extract out in the fall. They planted that with a cover crop. They tilled compost in. Then in the spring, when they dug the holes for all of these vines, they went ahead and put a handful of our compost into every single hole. Now, something went awry with their vines. They were stored for too long in the dark, or something happened in storage.
It was light leak.
Was it light leak? And what happened was that the manager thought, we're probably going to lose 40 to 60% of these vines because of this mistake that happened. It turned out that only one vine died. And that was a great sign. We were really excited about that, but we didn't jump up and down and shout and scream yet. We get to year 2, we get to year 3. Year 3, they pulled their first crop. They were actually able to harvest grapes off those vines. And the big buyers that came through, what they usually do, and with their conventional lot, what they do is the buyers come, they take all the grapes, and that gets mixed in with a bunch of other farms' grapes to make a type of wine. Well, when that same buyer came out to check this first year crop, they said, oh my gosh, this is a very small crop, but it's a very special crop. And they kept it by itself, and it made single source wine. Now, that was now we're in year 4, and they're seeing their vines are starting way before all their neighbors. They're putting out far more leaves. This year they're going to have a much larger crop.
This year was actually the year that they frosted.
Oh.
Everybody around here probably knows this year they frosted off and killed basically berries, apples, all that stuff. So they lost full crop this year, but next year we'll be able to compare. But this place is pretty spectacular. It's never had anything other than compost added. It's the only additives except for minor nutrients that we're using for teas when they're spraying on the leaf surfaces. Beyond that, it's never had any kind of NPK, no trace mineral, nothing else added to it. This clicker, dude.
Sorry about the clicker, Casey. 5-minute warning here, guys.
So I'm going to go through this really fast, but this is a project that we're doing. It's coastal. It's the whole point of this project was it was bare ground. There was only sandy. We had tumbleweeds. We had mustard. That was the only thing growing. The owner wanted to invest in creating habitat. And so on this property, we're working with native plants, and we've been using injection techniques like we talked about earlier, and then light foliar spray. This is a year's worth of time. We've hardly added any seed. We've sprayed compost extract twice. And the way that the native trees, you can see from one place to another, some of those trees have doubled in size. And it's a lot of the times you hear when you're from native plant specialists that you can't give compost or biology to them or they will die. This project blew our minds on how quickly we could see something just explode with growth with very little impact. I think this is our last slide, yeah? So these guys have been working with us for a while, and they're using the compost in a different way. Like we've actually been talking about how most people just use our compost for extracts and teas. So they actually use our solid amendment. They purchased quite a bit for a small facility, but still, if you're looking at the entire scale of all of the soil that they brought in, it's a very small percentage, but they actually mixed in the solid amendment into their beds when they got started. They knew they wanted to do living soil, and so they tried to start off with the best base that they could. I think they also use compost extracts and compost teas to follow up. I didn't get in as deep to ask them about root drenches and all that.
But don't worry, you can go ask them because they're here and they're in the back.
Yes. They are here today. Go and check out their herb and talk to them about their
Chris,
processes.
if you're back there, you want to stand up? Oh, there he is, right there.
Hey!
I guess we didn't have a slide for them made up, or for him made up either. But Stephen Cantwell over at Green Life Productions as well has also used our product, and you can talk to him about it as well.
Yes.
I think that's it.
All right, you guys.
That's it?
That's it.
You guys are the best speakers ever. You're like not making me come up on stage like I did to Scott. I had to kick Scott off the stage.
We have 3 minutes. If anyone has a question.
3
Any
minutes.
questions? Can I run the mic around anywhere?
Is there one
Yes.
question? Oh, there's one question.
Oh, there he
No?
is.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Steve.
All right, so curious about, I love Bassiana, Bavaria Bassiana. Are there any concerns with using it outdoors with bees? Because I want to do bees, include bees on our farm. Is there a certain time I can avoid that concern or anything like as far as that?
Yes, absolutely. So Bavaria Bassiana will indiscriminately kill soft-bodied insects when you're applying, so you can end up killing your beneficials as well. Oftentimes it's spraying in the late afternoon, which makes people nervous because of like mold issues at night, but it's definitely the best time to spray is basically after the sun is off of everything.
Or before the sun gets on everything.
Way
for you
early.
early risers.
For me and bees, like that's why I like the afternoon is because at least it gives it that overnight session to like, you know what I mean, to dry out and do its thing before the bees wake up in the morning.
Thank you, Steve. Anybody else here?
You don't have to.
Well-educated crowd.
Well educated.
Nope.
When you're making your humic extract,
Yes?
how much of that are you adding to, say, just 1 gallon? Or if you have a 5-gallon tote or something like that?
So if I was trying to deal with chlorine or chloramine, it's about a drop per gallon. And that's, if you're making it yourself, you're kind of guessing here. But you want to make sure the water looks pretty dark, like chocolate milk dark. You want to see some color to it. That would be like 1 drop per gallon. If you want to feed with it, you're not going to hurt anything. You can't overdo it with the humates that are coming from compost. So it's basically like what you have the tolerance to extract. It takes time, so it can be a slow process. All right, you guys.
1 minute.
Uno momento.
Okay.
All right.
We're good.
All right. Thank you
so
guys.
much.
You guys did an amazing job. Absolutely amazing.